Yeah, this format's pretty insane. I think we can all agree on that, right? So Power of the Elements introduced so many new tier 1 cards or tier 1 decks to the point where people are basically forgetting about the older decks. However, nobody's really forgetting about Mystic Mine. So today I'll be bringing you guys what I personally believe is the top 10 best decks of the format. But before this video starts, make sure you like and subscribe. Check me out on Twitch and Instagram, and now let's get right into it. So in the number 10 position is a deck that I really like a lot, but unfortunately it really underperformed, and that would be Exorcister. Now it has a really nice tier elements matchup, but unfortunately it doesn't really work very well against Blight because they don't necessarily need the graveyard as much as you think. They go first as well, you basically just lose, and because of that I can't really imagine Exorcister being any higher on the list because it doesn't really have a super good matchup against literally the most played deck. In the number 9 position I have Branded Despia, which is a deck that technically got better, but at the same time a little worse since it got power crept by the superior fusion deck, which is tier elements. Now Branded Despia is still no joke because it can scythe your opponent in draw phase or standby, play around Dark Ruler, Imperm, and Gamma, so it's still really nice, but it loses to DD Crow and random bullshit. So because of that, I can't really imagine Despia winning a YCS, maybe, but it still has the same flaws it always had. So again, DD Crow, Ash on Branded Fusion, and you can't do too much. Not to mention that if it has to go second on game 2 and 3, it has to go against like Anti-Spell and D-Barrier, which is ridiculous. Number 8 would have to be Flunderies. It is a deck that is either extremely good or extremely garbage. It depends on your hand, literally. So obviously, if you have like Dark Ruler and Robina, congratulations, you're good at the game. However, if you brick, it literally doesn't matter which board breaking cards you have. You can't play, you can't tribute summon, and therefore your deck is tier 500. In the number 7 position would be a deck that if you had to ask me like 1 week prior, Yasin, what do you think would be in the top 10? I wouldn't have thought about this deck, but now that the European Championship has ended, I'd say Sun Avalon Rika definitely gets it because it is still a 1-card combo deck. It can main deck Rivalry of Warlords, a lot of board breaking cards. It can play extenders, so it can play through hand traps. And obviously, since it searches trap cards in the combo, you can inherently play around Dark Ruler no more. And the game 2 and game 3 might be in your favor if you know how to side deck correctly. So it's a very good deck in the right hands and a very bad deck in the wrong hands. And in the number 6 position, I would have a tie between 3 decks because they kind of have something in common, and that would be their ability to play Mystic Mine. And those decks would be Sky Striker, Altergeist, and maybe Eldritch, because of course they're still good decks even without Mystic Mine. Altergeist has historically topped a lot of events, you know, back in the days. Sky Striker might be one of the decks that won the most amount of YCSs in history. It's basically a deck that will never die ever since it was created in 2018. Basically 5 years later, the deck is still extremely good. So yeah, don't sleep on Sky Striker. It's no joke. It can win in game 2 and game 3 even without Mystic Mine. It can obviously abuse Engage, and it has triple Kagari. Altergeist, it's still a good deck. People might not be respecting back row as much as they used to, so you can definitely catch people off guard. And again, if your deck building is good, it's gonna be nasty. And Eldritch is a deck that doesn't really need its normal summon, so that you can side Sphere Mode and Lava Golem against people, and you can protect yourself from Duster with Lord of the Heavenly Prison, so even game 2 and game 3 might not be too bad. In number 5, I would have a combo deck that I believe is great and can obviously get you some free wins in case your opponents are not prepared, and that would be Administer Mathmech because the Link 6 monster might be just an instant FTK against people that can't get over a monster with like 6k attack or 5k or even 4k or 3k attack if it's unaffected by card effects. So it's a really painful card, but unfortunately people do have access to Underworld Goddess, which is a universal kaiju in a way. Because of that, if your deck doesn't do other oppressive things, it might not be the best to turbo out that monster and realize that you can't do anything else to like stop your opponent from playing. But yeah, it's still a really good deck. It abuses the Mathmech engine, it can trigger Super Factorial, make your opponent lose a bunch of cards, and if you're willing to play Diameter as a break, quote unquote, in that deck because you are using your normal summon for the Administer monsters, then you can have an extra negate on top of the Danmari negate in the graveyard when you control a Link 6 monster. So it's still a very good deck, like I said. Alright, number 4 would be a deck that I also never would have thought would have been that good, but I'm gonna have to give it to Pure Punk. So I actually played against this deck a few times in my life, and it was always really interesting because the deck building kind of varies from person to person. Some people are playing more of a trap-heavy build of Pure Punk, whereas some other people are playing with like hand traps and Gizmek, Desires, etc. because they want to be able to make a Psychic and Punisher whenever they want, play like so many hand traps that their opponents literally can never play, and then they win in simplified game state. And the deck can inherently play through like 1 or 2 hand traps depending on your hand and depending on what your opponent hand traps. And if your combo goes through, you can end on like Baron with King Calamity on your opponent's turn, so that they basically have to skip their turn, which is ridiculous. So the ceiling level is extremely high. The consistency level is definitely there because it plays a lot of 1-card starter, Ogre Dance, Xiamen, Emergency Teleport, etc. Number 3 is not really a control deck, but rather a mid-range deck that is probably the better version of not really Sword Soul, but kind of, and that would be Mech. Again, it can abuse Super Factorial, which is one of the best trap cards in the game right now. And actually, you know what? I want to compare this deck to Trap Brigade when I think about it, because this card is basically Revolt 2.0 for the deck, but instead of only banishing 1 card your opponent controls, you're making your opponent lose 3 cards in total, kind of like a Trishula, but on top of that, you have an Omni Negate. All of that was just with 1 card, so you still have 4 other cards. You can go for Heat Soul, draw a bunch of cards that can play so many hand traps or board breaking cards. You have a lot of control over your deck building and how you want to operate going first or second against everyone, and even in the side deck, you can draw your side deck cards very fast. It's a really, really good deck. In the number 2 position, some people might be shocked, but I believe that the deck might be a little worse than people think, and that would be Splight. Even though it's extremely ridiculously good, it still kind of falls victim to everything that people are playing right now, such as Super Poly, because if you summon the Dupe Frog with Toad, then you get Super Polyed for Garura, or if you have like Splight Elf with the Red or Carrot, again, you get Super Polyed. Dark Ruler is still insane. Mystic Mine might be broken if you already had to use up your smashers before, because there is no other outside of that. So the deck has, again, a lot going for it, but definitely a few flaws that make it so I can't really imagine it being the best option for above average player to use to win an event. I believe that Tearlaments might be better. Alright, speaking of the devil, I believe that the best deck in the entire game is actually Tearlaments, because it just has such a high consistency and ceiling level. It can combine a lot of archetypes and themes from, other decks such as the Punk engine, as well as, the Danger engine, in order to get, dig into your deck in order to draw, like, your side deck cards, or your Dark Ruler more if you're going second, because nobody's really negating, like, your Danger monsters in hand. So the deck definitely breaks boards like there is no tomorrow going second. It loses the D-Barrier a bit, but at the same time, depending on your deck building, you might still have options. So if you get D-Barriered for Fusion, if you're playing Punk, you can still Synchro and Link Summon, and if you're playing Danger, then you're Link Summoning a lot, and you're probably OTKing your opponent with, like, Access Code, or whatever else. The beauty about Tearlaments that Splight doesn't really have is the fact that it's so scalable. Like, you can add so many more engines and kind of make it into your own creation, where Splight is a little more restricted on what you can actually do, because you can only really play like level and rank and link 2 monsters. Tearlaments, basically anything that makes sense, you can play it, make your deck way more aggressive, way more consistent as well, and super explosive, draw into your side deck cards, and pop off like there's no tomorrow. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know your thoughts about the top 10 best decks in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.